Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast brought to you by Tacticam. Tacticam is by far the easiest way to begin filming your hunts. Whether it's the budget-friendly solo or the 4K 5.0, Tacticam has something for everyone. Check them out at tacticam.com. This year we are also working with Spartan Forge. Spartan Forge is AI for the deer woods. They've created a neural network based on collared deer studies, car deer accidents, social media posts to predict the best days to be in the woods. We just did a podcast with them. I believe it was number 174, and Bill goes through kind of how it works and what the interface looks like. It is now available as an app, so you can check out the Apple Store or Google Play. It should be back on, but it was in beta, and on the podcast, Bill talks about when it was going to be back up. Obviously, I've got it on my phone, so it's there. I couldn't tell you if it's back up, but it was going to be a week or two, and since I've been elk hunting, I believe that time should have passed by now. So you can check them out at spartanforge.ai. If you would like more information, you can sign up there. I believe you can still use code BOWHUNTER for the 25% discount. I don't believe that was right off of just for the beta, but you can certainly check that out, spartanforge.ai. Man, so the introduction to this podcast, I shout out some of our Patreons to talk about the deer that they've killed. And since then, there have been some really big bucks gone down here in Michigan. Eric Loso, one of our Patreons, shot a 13-point double split G2 drop tine buck, Michigan public land, complete stud of a buck. I don't care if you're in Iowa, Kansas. This buck is really something. Going to try and get him on the podcast to talk about it here coming up soon. And then Tori Owens right here out of the Muskegon area shot a really nice public land 8-point, great Michigan deer. Congratulations to those guys. Keep them coming, and we will give you guys big congrats. That's why we do this. Living vicariously through you. I feel like I'm so far behind on whitetail hunting this year because of the elk trip right in the middle. But this podcast, you guys are really going to like it. If you're a pure bow hunter and you only want bow hunting tips, tricks, and tactics, and you have not yet built the relationship with us as the podcast hosts and the group that we've got going on here, this one might not be for you, but this was such a great trip, so fun, learned so much about breaking down elk, the elk camp, and I ended up shooting an elk last day with a rifle, only to prove how easy rifle hunting is. No, I mean, it's unfortunate that it ended up that way, just because it plays into the stereotype that we here on the podcast have for rifle hunters, but it really did bring me back to when I was a kid and the rifle camps and deer camp and all of that. Really enjoyed it, break down the whole hunt, everything like that. But we do got to give a shout out to our latest Patreon, Austin Berlin out of Marshall, Michigan. Just signed up tonight as I was doing one of the Vitals Live. Vitals Live, the Patrons get access to that too. So if you haven't signed up for that, one of the Patrons, go back through the Patreon page, and there's a login there so you can go check out all of the previous live webinars that we've done through the Vitals Live. You can check it out at thevitalslive.com. But I did one tonight with Greg Litzinger, and while I was doing that, Austin signed up. So thank you so much, Austin. Patreon is a crowdfunding for creators, and we really do appreciate it. It covers the hosting, equipment, this microphone, this recorder that we're using here, all of those things. Can't thank you guys enough. You can check that out at patreon.com/Bowhunter Chronicles podcast or bowhunterchroniclespodcast.com and just click the Patreon link, links in the Instagram, all of that. And then we do try to give back as much as we can. Partnered with Tacticam, as you heard in the beginning. Tacticam gives away a package every quarter. We do quarterly giveaways. Zinger Fletchings, they give away one of their test packs for fletching, so one of the Patreons, Spartan Forge, year subscription for that. And we are still on the fence as far as what we're going to be giving away for this quarter. But in the Marco Polo group for the Patreons, there has been a lot of talk, a lot of questions, lots of different stuff about packs. So I believe we're going to give away another pack or two, whether it's going to be one of the high dollar packs like a elk hunting pack, or maybe like a saddle hunting style pack, the K2 or Everly Stock X2. You guys let me know what you want, and I believe we're going to do a back tension release as well. Being John loves the Carter stuff, it's probably going to be a Carter Evolution or a Silverback. We will just have to figure that out, but that's what we're going through. We're still looking for ideas. We just want you guys to have the best experience. We appreciate everything that you do for us, and we just want to give back. Really do appreciate it. But if Patreon's not for you, no big deal. Do us a favor. Tell someone else about the podcast, or leave us a review. Now, normally I don't really see the reviews or whatever, but I do go back through them as it comes up through my email. And I did read the latest one from Christographer 7. So we do appreciate all of the feedback. Christographer has said that the podcast is amazing. Topics are great. Information is great. The guests are interesting. Everything is great except for Adam, which is me. He says the host says in the housekeeping intros. Normally I don't nitpick, but it's very, very distracting. All in all, juice is worth the squeeze. Man, I'm just a man. So I do appreciate the feedback. I'm working on it. I'll try and cut out the ums. I will definitely, I couldn't help it. Definitely try and work on that. I've been working on it since I read that, and I'm definitely aware. So thank you, Chris. Get a hold of me. Shoot me an email. We'll get you a T-shirt and some stickers and stuff sent out to you. So shoot me an email, Christographer. Thank you for the review. You guys, if you can leave us some more reviews, that would be great. It helps us. It lets us know the things that we are doing well and the things that we can improve on. But this episode is a great one. Frank, John, myself, back talking. We talk about Frank's elk hunt a little bit as well. So it's a really fun podcast, a little bit of back and forth because of John's bow hunting only mentality. But, you know, we're going to have that. So thank you for listening. Enjoy the episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bow Hunter Chronicles podcast. Thanks for sticking with us as I was hunting, and, hunting comes first. Although, if you want a pure bow hunt, this is not going to be this podcast, but we're going to get into my elk trip. And so if you just want, the bow hunting only, you're a purist, turn it off right now. All right, go to another one.
I'm out of here.
John hasn't been here in a month or so. You have to stay. But real quick, I want to say congratulations to Jason Ladagass, first public land buck, biggest buck. Alex shot a doe. Chris Burnett has his first deer with a bow, first buck with a bow. All of that. And Brad Collins, BDS Outdoors, rolls his kayak, ruins his camera, I think on Wednesday. Goes out and shoots his first deer from a saddle on Saturday. I'm sure I'm missing somebody else, but a lot of stuff has happened. It's been good hunting since I was gone. John, welcome back. John has really heard about zero from this trip, except for I called him from Colorado, and he's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Well, shot an elk. I had to shoot him with the gun." And he's like, "Awesome, great, you asshole, fucker." Boom.
Actually, I think I said, "Don't really want to hear about it."
And then Frank, he says, "Have you heard from John?" I said, I I called him when I was out there, and he wasn't impressed. He goes, "Yeah, I sent him a picture. He didn't even respond." So I'm like, "Oh, Jesus!" Like,
That's it. I quit.
I'm like, well, I mean, I knew he was,
I told Ernie, I said, we're going to have to change the name. Bo Gun Hunter Chronicles.
So, what's been up, John? You've been absent off the podcast here for a minute. Where you been? What's up?
I've just been busy working, and I did go up. I was supposed to go hunting up to our property. Was that a couple weeks ago? And then got some bad news about my buddy that's in the UP. And so we decided to go up to see him. I did sneak out. That was the first night, or the first opportunity to hunt. And so I went out and hunted one night, and then I went out the next morning. But, I was pretty bummed about that. But then busy. I been working my butt off on building projects, and then I did make it out made up to my property this weekend, but got up there late Friday. I didn't go out Saturday morning. Went out Saturday night. Did find pretty good sign. Found a bunch of fresh grapes, some rubs. Sat, got wet, rained on me, so got back to the trailer and my gear was soaking wet, and I was like, you know what? I'm not even going out in the morning. I had one deer come in so I was rushing around at the truck, and I left my phone in the truck because it was like dead on the way there. So I plugged it in, and I was trying to get it, as charged as possible. In the meantime, I forgot. So I got out into the swamp on the edge, and I was like, I'll go to pull up my base map. I'm like, oh, shit. I don't have my freaking phone. And it's not like I'm going to get lost, but it's easy to get turned around out there. And it's especially right now, the low cover is still covered in leaves.
Oh, yeah.
So when it's like that, it's just like walking in a maze. And it would have been one thing if it would have just been me up there. But my wife was back at the trailer. She'd been there all afternoon. And, she's like, well, don't be too late. I want to sit by the fire. I'm like, well, if I go out there and get turned around, then she's going to be freaking out. She don't have a vehicle.
Be calling you.
Well, yeah, well,
Can't get a hold of you.
So I was like, I didn't go into this as far as I normally do. And yeah, I was actually getting down. I got my bow on the ground. I only used one bow rope, and there was a limb that I had trimmed off, and I threw that off. And when it hit the ground, I heard something. It was like sploosh, sploosh, sploosh. And it actually was coming at me then. Like it heard the tree limb like getting rubbed. And, but then it stopped. So it was like right out where I would have, been probably where it was coming from, but at last light. But so anyway, I've had 3 sits. It's October
24th.
24th. Holy sh!
Day after my birthday, dude.
Yeah. Oh, happy birthday.
Thanks.
So, but that's it for me. I just been hanging out.
All right. So the ball's in your court. You're the host. I'm the guest.
Right. So let's hear about your elk hunting trip. So when you left, when did you leave?
So we left that Wednesday night. So I don't know what the dates were, but basically the hunt, it was first rifle, Colorado, and we had to be there at like 10 o'clock on Friday. Season started on Saturday, and then they came and picked us up Thursday, which was the end of the season. So our hunt was Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 5-day hunt. So we left Wednesday night, drove to Rawlins, Wyoming. So drove straight through to Rawlins. So we left at like 6, got to Rollins at like 6 on Thursday, 7 on Thursday, and then it wasn't even that late. It was like 2:00 or something. But they had a rifle range there, and those guys had already figured it all out. And it was my dad's buddy, and Frank. What are you doing?
I'm just looking to see what the date was.
So it was. They had a rifle range there, and those guys had figured it out. It was my dad's buddy Tom, his son's buddy Matt, who was actually one of our Patreons, listens to the podcast, and then me. So it was 6 guys. Oh, and then one of Tom's buddies. So there's 6 guys in camp. So they did all the figuring out. The way that they had figured this place out is Tom's dad's been going there for like 20 years to the actual guided lodge deal. And it was, he was like 17 for 20 going out there. And so my dad has been out there to the real lodge, everything. And there was his son Kyle had wanted to do this trip. He called out there, and they had a cancellation for the spike camp. And he wanted to do it with a group of his buddies, go out there, share a camp, do that. And he wanted a little bit of adventure, rather, because he'd been out there to the lodge before. But like basically all of his buddies backed out, and he was kind of like stuck with trying to fill it. And so that's how I ended up going. But anyways, so they had already researched all of this, and there was a 1,000-yard rifle range in Rollins. And then we got there, and I was just along for the ride, and they had a full-on bow 3D core like range, but it was like freaking 30-mile-an-hour winds. It was like I was holding like 6 inches off at 50 yards to hit like where I needed to be. It was pretty wild, but yeah. So that's when we left.
So that was in Wyoming. Then so you guys stayed the night in Wyoming.
Yep.
And then you got up.
Yep. And we had
finished.
we had to be there in Colorado by like 10 a.m. So we got up at like 5 and drove there. We like literally pulled in, took our stuff out of the truck, changed. We were kind of like, I think we were in our clothes that we were going to go in with. Threw our stuff on this truck, this big ass truck, and they drove us down to the stables, and we got on our horses and rode in. So
that was going to be my next question. So when you get there and you get on the horse, do they like pack the horses up with your gear? Like you just say, okay, here's my bag.
Yeah. So
valet.
Well, no. So yes and no, really. So the deal is like you got packed. It was all part of like what the deal was, but you got like a horse to ride in, and then a horse to carry your pack and your food. So you got 2 45-pound
sacks.
Allocations.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it had to be even. So when we got our stuff there, we threw it all out, and then they weighed each thing so it went evenly on the horses. Because I guess if it's off by like more than like 2 or 3 pounds, like the horses freak out, and it can be a bad deal. So they like threw all of our stuff out on a tarp. They weighed it all up, and then they put it on the things. But the guys so there was another camp that was like a couple miles away, like over the next ridge. It was probably like 2 miles away. I guess they just packed their shit like random. They told us specifically like it's got to be like this size to fit in the panniers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was 6 guys, 6 horses, and then 6 horses for your gear. Well, they took 8 horses for their gear, and they said it was an extra $250 per horse if you had to do that. But when we got there, they didn't have enough horses because of the other guys. So like half of us went in, and then when those other guys came back, they brought it in, and we only took 5 horses with all of our stuff because like they're like the guy's like, oh, you did a really good job like packing your stuff in, and then like we'll get to it a little bit later. But when the second guy came to pick up the bulls the first day, he's like, oh, are you guys those guys? And he said, no, Seth said, we did a really good pack. He goes, oh, you guys did a fine job packing in. Those other motherfuckers, that's rude. He's like, that's bullshit, so, but yeah, so we had it like specific size bags and stuff like that. I just used my pack, but seeing how it was done now, I probably would have used like a duffel bag because it would have just been easier all around, but it was
okay.
different.
So you get back there. And so you get in there the night before season, basically. So you go up glass. But so when you get back to this, do they set up camp or is it already set?
It's already set. So there was 2 tents. There was one that had 3 folding tables in it, 6 folding chairs. It had like a 30-pound propane tank with like a 2-headed Mr. Buddy heater, and then like a 2-burner camp chef with no pans, no griddle, no nothing. And then there was like a first aid kit and some extra batteries. There was 2 LED lanterns, a chainsaw to cut your firewood. And then in the other tent, there was 6 cots and a wood stove. And that was it.
So you brought in all your own cooking gear.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And your own food.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you take with you like that for, what did you?
Well, in hindsight, and I think when we like got together, because these guys were all on the other side of the state, except for my dad and I, and Matt's like out of Lansing, we should have like said, this is the menu for dinners, and then this is our food, but everybody brought it in like it was a backcountry hunt. So we all had, like every night we would get together and eat fucking Mountain House or, Peak Refuel or whatever, Ready Wise. And, John knows,
right.
After a couple of days, you're like, fuck, man, I want some real food.
Right.
So, 2 of the nights we ate elk heart and mashed potatoes and biscuits and stuff, and that was phenomenal. And I brought in some pre-cooked bacon and we cooked that up, and that was great. But if we would have done it differently, but everybody had their own tote with their own food, so in our mind, we just were like, oh, that's all our stuff. And if we would have done it as a community deal, it would have been a better like experience altogether.
Man. So what about water?
Oh yeah. There was 6-gallon water jugs.
And then you had to go like you could refill them?
Well, you had a radio, you could call them. And so like the one day when he came and picked up the bull on the last day, the one that I shot, he said, we heard him on the radio saying that they were already bringing water to that other camp. And we're like, well, if you're bringing water, you could bring us some too, but we don't need it. But
So did you guys have any streams on me? You could get it out of right there.
So below us, our camp was, I think, like at 8,200 or 8,400 feet. At 7,000 feet, which was right immediately below us, was a creek. So we could have got water, but it was so dry in the tent. Like the one day they had a pan full of snow on there. If we were really gonna die, we could have.
So did they leave the horses with you?
No.
They just they bring you in, drop you.
Yep.
So when you're there, you don't have to worry about horses. You just and so before you left, you were talking about we were talking about like your plan of attack, and like the area was not as big because of the other camps. So did you cover the whole area?
No, that was like, I think strictly out of, well, it was a long ass ways, but it was like kind of one of those deals where like, are you going to leave elk to find elk type thing? Because where we were situated was on this ridge between 2 mountains. And so like the first day we get up there, we're getting all of our stuff situated and whatnot. On the way in, until we got to our ridge, they didn't really tell us anything as far as like where to sit. But we come up over this thing and they're like, there's this one really big spruce right there. That's a pretty good spot to sit, And then we get like halfway to camp and then there's this like it was aspens coming down, and then there was a finger of like dark timber, like 2 little ridges of dark timber, and then it was all the oak brush right here, and then that came up into like some oak brush and went down into some aspens, but it made a saddle right there. And he's like, you'd be surprised how many bulls were killed right here, like 20 yards from because they're just coming up out of that bottom and over into the next one. And then just on the other side of camp, there was this big knob. Well, it was all oak brush, and then it was the same thing. It was dark timber that went down from the creek below. And we're sitting there, so that's where they told us, like, you can kind of sit. Then once we got up there, we took a walk. We got to like that little saddle thing, and they said, you probably don't want to go trouncing around too much tonight. Probably just lay low, see what you see. Well, two guys had gone up on that knob, and where we were at, we couldn't see them, but they had 5 bulls come up out of that bottom, and we were looking across. I seen a bear in the oak brush, and then when we got back, we were looking over there, and there's freaking elk right directly across from us. We're sitting there glassing them, and I got that LR spotter, and I was videoing them across the way, and they were like 1,400 yards away. We're sitting there. There's guys at camp just sitting in those folding chairs, smoking cigars or whatever. Matt like walks up, and he's like, dude, like right there was a 5x5 and a cow like less than 200 yards right below camp that just bedded down right there. Like, so we were like just watching them, and they were there for a while. And so, from where we were at, you could see elk. We couldn't see what was behind us. So basically we could hunt in front of us or behind us to the next ridge. We couldn't really see what was going on back there, but it was a 2-mile walk to see if you could see elk where we were seeing them all out in front of us. So
right. So how many miles was it back in?
I don't know. It took an hour on the horses.
Okay.
So I don't, but it was like you left out of the stables and you dropped down, and there was like a couple switchbacks, and you got into this creek bottom. Then you went up, and like, so when we got there, it was like that day was like 17 degrees in the morning, and it had just snowed like 3 or 4 inches. So like where we had to go up this really steep thing, like not the horse that the packer was taking us in on, but the first horse in our string was like freaking out and was like down on its back feet and trying to go down. And the guy that was on it didn't like riding horses. Then the horse in front of me, like just laid right down. It was like trying to rear up, and then it went down, and it was just laying on its belly, just laying there in the trail. My horse was trying to figure out what's going on. It's like, it was a mess. And then, we went up and up through all this dark timber, zigzag back and forth, then got on the ridge that ended up being behind our camp. And then it was probably a mile this way. And then we went up and made a turn, and then it was a mile back. So I couldn't tell you.
Okay, now we're gonna get to the nitty gritty. So you get in you get in there that night. You guys are setting up camp, looking at all these elk and stuff. First morning, what happens? What's your plan?
Well, so my plan, like you and I had talked about it, was just to kind of glass and see what was going on. And I was, they said don't go down in there and like, you might blow all the elk out of there, and then you'll end up not seeing anything the rest of the week. So the first 2 days, I just sat with my dad. But that was like one of those things where, I'll tell you on the first day, I think maybe my like being overzealous might have cost my dad a bull. I mean, he ended up missing. Who knows if he hit it now anyway, but I can give him shit because he missed. But like I knew that I was the liability, right? So it wasn't like I didn't want to go wreck everybody else's hunt based on, me wanting to be like all gung ho. Like that,
Right.
That just wasn't, that wouldn't have been very nice. But turned out that we had decent cell phone service out there, especially to text. So we had noticed that like the first night. So but when we got in there, so Kyle, they went a mile all the way over to that spruce, and my dad and I set up in that saddle, and then the other guys set up on the knob. So right at 7:20, I guess, Kyle shot a bull, and then an hour later, his dad shot a bull, and then on that knob, Matt had one in his sights, and it had to be 4 on one side or a 5-inch brow tine.
Mm-hmm.
And so Matt couldn't make that one legal, so he didn't shoot. And then I don't know if it was that day. I think it was that day. He shot and he missed. But at noon, at 11 o'clock, I turned on my phone and it said, Kyle shot a bull, 2 bulls down, like that quick. And so my dad and I, we were sitting there and we were glassing like 800 yards over here. We seen elk going across the mountain, over to where Tom and Kyle were. And then, later on, way up top, there was elk across the way. And that was the ones that were like, 1,400, 1,200 yards away. And then my dad saw some way down in the bottom, and he just seen him skirt through. And I turned my phone on, and that's when I got that message. So I was like, well, shit, I'll try and give it so I called Tom, and he's like, so this is a guy, right, that, like, if we were to do this again, I would pay the money for Frank to go just to have these 2 guys in camp, because they're like the same person. They tell stories with like, oh, Joe Malaki, he used to live over on this. He used to drive a red Ford, you remember, right? It's like
The Herbert Road.
Yeah. Yeah. What year was that? Well, that was 1974. Like, you know how old I am? Well, like, how the hell would I know that? Well, you know what I'm talking about. The same guy. They're the same guy. So it would have been great. Well, I call him and he's like, we're over here. We're cutting up Kyle's bull. We got it a quarter of the way done. Mine's over there. It's dead, sitting in the sun. It's a fucking mess. And I'm like, do you want some help? And he's like, no. Don't wreck your hunt to come help us. But it's a mess. So I'm like, well, I'll head over there. My dad saw some elk in the bottom. We'll give it about an hour, and then I'll head over. And that would have made it about noon. Well, about 11:45. Coming up out of that bottom, 11 elk just come screaming by. They were like maybe 100 yards away, 80 yards away. But it was like, cow, spike, 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 cow, spike, cow, spike. And so there was 4 spikes in the group, and they went running across, and they went into those aspens, and then they went in. We seen them like creeping back across this dark timber. So I'm like, well, my dad's like, are you going to go help Tom? I'm like, yeah, I'll go. And he's like, kind of, I don't know if he was packing up his stuff to like go or what. And I'm like, well, why don't you go? We'll set up over here on this point of this dark timber right here, because if they're milling around in there or whatever, that's where those other elk went. So, maybe they'll be over there. Well, he was hurting. Like when we went over there, and then I knew they were around the other way. So I just side hilled around rather than go all the way up. And then Pat and Matt had heard that they shot those bulls. So they were going to come, and they thought I knew exactly where they were at. And I'm like, I don't know where they're at. I know that they're around here, and I didn't want to go up there. So they just followed me, and then we saw them and went down there. But why I think that might have been detrimental is so I went over there, and they had the one bull pretty much all taken care of. They were just finishing it up. We gave her high fives and all that stuff, took some pictures. And then I went over to the other elk and started cutting it up. And so we did the gutless method. And so that one, I just kind of helped skin it, and I didn't really, I watched them and helped, did everything. And like, that was worth the price of the whole trip. Like, having the experience of like seeing like what a freaking big animal and like a big undertaking and like having to do two at once, you know, like what that all entailed, like super cool experience. But I go back around, those guys are like, well, I'm going to go down the trail. And they waited right as we were finishing up that one. They had already called the packer guy. And so he came back there with the mules and was picking it up. And I'm like, well, you guys are all set. I'm going to go find my dad. Well, my dad wasn't where I left him. So he had moved back and he was setting up in this bush. So I got in that and he's like, you almost killed me. We got set up in this bush and we were looking down where those elk had crossed, and where we seen them, we could shoot to the aspens. But in my head, and I'd heard like I don't know, like a faint bugle or like just like a elk noise, like and so I look over my shoulder and I was thinking, they said, pay attention right here. And they said, if you're just patient, if you just sit in one spot all week, you'll probably get a shot at an elk. Well, I look and there's freaking elk right up in that little saddle, like right in front of where we were sitting, So I'm look up there and it's just a spike. And I'm like, hey, Dad, there's a spike. I turn back and there's a freaking giant elk in there. So I'm like, get over here, get the gun, and it was like probably 300 yards away, 250, somewhere in there. And I get him in front of me and, gets the gun up, and I'm like, no, there's two. They're going, and they went. I mean, they had to have been probably 90 yards from where we were sitting earlier in the morning. So it's like, if we wouldn't have moved, but maybe if there wasn't that commotion or whatever, they wouldn't have been up there,
Right.
6 of one, half a dozen the other. But
Were they spooked?
I think that they just knew that they shouldn't hang out in that field. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't like down on this side of the mountain. They just came up along the edge of this oak brush. Mm-hmm. And then it went into like a little bit like of a grass pasture. And that led up to that saddle and down over to the next thing. So I think it was just like a transition area, But just being able to like help break down those elk and everything was super cool. Like that was a great experience. And that night they came back and they kept the heart out of one of them. Tom shot the heart twice on his, so there was nothing left of it. Then we ate heart the next night, that Tuesday night, but yeah. So as far as like my plan, it was like leave these elk that we had in front of us. And so the first 2 days I sat with my dad along that place, and because there had been a lot of snow, and then down in that bottom, with the north facing and all that stuff, there was still a bunch of snow down there, and you could see these runways. And so the third day, I had gone down in there, and my dad's like, make sure you're back up here by dark or whatever, because he was worried I was going to get hurt or something like that. So I went down there and I sat in the saddle. I sat in that dryad saddle down in that bottom, and it was kind of like messed up. You remember we went to Idaho, and the guy, they were talking about hunting. He was talking about how he'd like go down into those really like shitty bottoms. Mm-hmm. Well, like that's like kind of like what this was, but the wind was like, I was like, I don't know how to hunt the wind in these bottoms. You think about, the thermals come up, but when you're in a like deep cut like that, it's like, well, it's coming down over here and going up over there. It's not going up both ways. And then the wind is just, the wind was whistling and creating a swirl. So I'm like, I don't really know if this is like where I need to be. But I sat there until like noon, 2, 3 o'clock. And when Matt had shot at the one, must have been the second day when he shot at the one, because he said he was covered up in cows, and they came around and they were right below our camp, and they could hear the cows whine, mewing and all that. And so he's like, well, I can't do anything. I walked along that bottom and found a nice little grass meadow down there. And, there was so much elk sign, John. There was so many rubs and so much, tracks everywhere. It wasn't like, oh man, there's elk tracks. It was like, you can't, there's elk tracks through our camp. Like,
Right.
There was a lot of elk there. And so then I found that spot and I'm like, oh, this has to be where those elk were, like right below our camp. I can see where that one elk was bedded, right there. And so I'm like, tomorrow I'm coming down here. Well, that fourth day, it was a fucking blizzard. Like, it was snowing. Well, okay. This is funny too. So the first night we had to cut up all the firewood when we were in there. So we cut that all up, stack it all in there. Well, they stacked it and it kind of leaned over and one of the pieces was touching the stove. We wake up in the middle of the night, or Matt does, and the stove would last like 2 or 3 hours. So anytime anybody woke up or you had to pee, like you just got up and put wood in the fire. Well, like it was fucking, Matt wakes up and he's like
Smoking.
The whole tent was full of smoke. And he's like, is anybody seeing this? Am I the only one that's seeing this? Kyle jumps out of bed and he's doing the fucking belly crawl because he's like training sets in, right? He's like, stop, drop, and roll, get low. So he like crawls over to the tent, the edge of the tent, and unzips it and lets
the smoke out.
Lets the smoke out. Like the rest of us are just like looking around. But it was.
And then they took the piece of wood.
Yeah, they took the piece of wood outside.
Outside that was
smoldering.
Smoldering, yes.
But the night going into
just
that
throw
night,
it in the stove.
Yeah, you probably should have.
But that night, going into that blizzard day, the wind was like, it was like going to lift our tent up. Like it was knocking shit down off of, because we had clothes hanging up and knocked the lantern down. My bow was just like, I got up and had to take my bow down because I'm like, it's going to come crashing down. But it was terrible. Like, and that was the day that I went down in the bottom and nobody saw a single elk that day. And that was the fourth day. So I had told them, like, I said, we had talked about it on here, like, last day you'll probably grab a gun or whatever. And so then after Tom and Kyle shot those ones the first day, I said, well, last day I'm just going to take your gun and I'm going to go down there and I'm going to shoot one. Oh, okay. And then, like, I think when I came back up out of that bottom, because I stayed down there until like 3-4 o'clock, and I had like 2 inches of snow on me, and it was kind of cool, kind of eerie, like where you've probably seen it on TV when you're like looking out over the mountains or whatever, and you can see like the weather. Mm-hmm. And even like sometimes, like I know in California, like when you're down like closer to sea level and you look up and you can see like, oh, there's bad shit going on up there. Well, that's what it was like. And I didn't want to get stuck down in that bottom. And then I was wearing just my puffy and I was using my outer jacket, same one that you've got, wrapped around my legs. I had frickin' boot warmers on my boots, and then I had socks pulled over my toes on my boots. I'm just sitting down there freezing. But then, like I said, the weather wasn't letting up, so I was like, well, I need to get up there or out of here before, I gets too slippery.
So you went down in there 2 days?
Yeah. Yep. So I sat with my dad for 2 days. I went down in the bottom and like hunted, where I thought the elk were moving through. And I think I just picked 2 bad days, and then as more pressure, came in and, we saw less and less elk as the week went on.
Right.
So
the bullets are flying. So you said, did your dad missed one then?
Yeah. So
what day was that?
The last day.
Oh.
So, the day before, so that third day, so Matt must have missed one the first day or the second day. And then the third day, he went all the way over to that spruce, and they had seen some elk in the morning, I believe. And then they said, all the guy that owns the place, he said, all that bulls are usually killed by 10:30. He's like, after 10:30, wait till the evening. Like nothing's going on. So, it was like 10 o'clock and they're like, oh, we're not going to see anything. So they moved the gun aside and put the sticks down. And they're making coffee. And Matt's buddy Kyle, he's like, bull. And these are like, he said like 90 yards away, like right below him, coming up to him. So he just gets the gun up and puts it on there, shoots. And Kyle's like, you hit him. And then he spun around and he shot him. And that time he did hit him. And then he shot at him again and missed. Went down there and just found like a couple little spots of blood. And they tracked him, as far as they could find blood. There was no significant blood, just like little specks of blood. So I don't know if they just nicked him or what. So yeah, that's what happened there. So then the last day I said, Tom, I'm just going to take your gun, go down there if that's still all right. He's like, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I got a tutorial on the Ruger M77, went down there and got set up. And
So how far, so in that out, what was the yardage on the shot?
The one that I shot?
Yeah.
It was like 265. And so it was in that same bowl where that spruce was. And so if I would have taken my bow and went down there that day, I would have set up probably underneath that spruce. Because basically where my bull died and where I shot him was, he died 175 yards from that spruce. And to the point of the aspens, because it was this big bowl, there was a point right here that came down that was 250, 275. That was aspens. Then there was another ridge that was 400 yards. And then past that, there was another ridge that was like 800 yards. So it was like a big finger, like crow's foot or whatever that came down. Well, he came over that first ridge, over to the second ridge, and came right up at the point of those aspens. Well, that would have been like 125 yards there, so I would have had no shot. If I'd have went down into those aspens, the wind was blowing from that way, so it would have just been, I may not have even seen him, or he might have, winded me or whatever.
Right.
So, whatever. But so I'm sitting there and I'm by myself. I'd taken my binos out of the bino harness, took my rangefinder out, and got the gun on some. Matt had the same trekking poles that we have, but they make like a little thing that goes on either one of them that locks them together like a
tripod.
Yeah,
or a bipod.
Yeah. So he had that, so I set it up, sitting there, and it was like watching one like little caribou or like reindeer like come across. It was so far away. And I'm like looking through the binoculars, and I was like, it looks like a spike. And John walked by my antlers in the garage, and he's making fun of them. But I even told those guys, I said, I think the whitetail I killed was bigger than those. I mean, it doesn't have the mass, but
Yeah, the picture Frank sent me, I was like, oh, it's not a bad bull. And then I walked in and I'm like, well, that's definitely had some shrinkage in the picture.
But so I lost him in the binoculars because he went down below where those aspens were, and they had said that they would get up on that other side, like on the military crest of that one, on the back side where you couldn't see him, then squirt out the bottom, and it was like 330 yards to the bottom. And so I'm like, well, I seen an elk, and then I got the gun up because I was trying to see like what could I see? What does it look like as you're there? Because it only had a 9-power scope on it. My binoculars were 10, and you have a much wider field of view.
Could you tell when you're, glassed him? Could you tell he was a legal bull?
Well, no, that was the thing. So I brought the gun up because I thought I lost him, and I was just looking, and then I seen the body of the elk, and he was just standing there looking around. he had his nose up and he was smelling. He was looking up at that spruce. It was like, somebody there.
Right.
And then when he turned his head, I saw something out in front of his antlers. So I was like, well, he's legal. So I got the gun up and I found him in the gun. I'm like, oh man, I still can't tell, I'm like, I don't know. So then I put the binoculars down, grabbed the rangefinder, put the rangefinder up. It was like 260 something. So I'm like, okay, they're shooting. This is 2 inches high at 300 or something. So then I get the gun back up, and now all of a sudden he's turned and he's like coming down. I'm like, shoot, and the fucker goes down. And I'm like, well, I hit him, and
Did you shoot him in the neck?
no, well, that's what's funny.
Normal.
That's what's funny is so I rack it and then I look up and he's getting up, and I'm like, oh man! So I get back on the gun and I shoot again, come off the gun, and I rack another one in. Well, the shell didn't eject and it's stuck on the end of the bolt, so I'm fucking around with that. Get back in there, and like they said, well, I didn't hear him say this, but they said the guide, like at the lodge, said shoot them until they stop moving. So he's running away now, and I get on the gun, shoot again, and then I had the same thing, and I had a fuck of a time getting it off there. And then I got back in there, and then I couldn't see him. He wasn't there anymore. So I'm like, whoa. Fuck, I'm like, I shot him and he went like right down. I'm like, Bambi on ice,
Right.
And so then I get the binoculars up and I'm like, did that just really happen? And then I'm like, well, I just shot one with a gun. Fuck. And then so I'm like looking through the binoculars, like trying to like even place like where everything went down, like trying to get my bearings.
So that way when you get over there,
Yeah. It's a ways away, and you got to go down and up, and
everything's going to look completely different when you get over there.
So I get like, where he went down, I can see now. Okay, there's a big scuff mark there. I mean, you can see.
So you know what you could have used, right? Your basement remote marker.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about it. It was a fucking Chinese fire drill, man. I was like, yeah.
Because you knew it was 260 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you could have used the azimuth, look over there, place marker, and then you would have been able to walk right to that spot.
Yeah, it would have been really cool. But
a little too much adrenaline, maybe.
But I mean, it was just like
fucking yard sale shit just out the window.
Well, that's exactly what it was. I mean, because again, like that's the last thing that I expected. And like, me, like in incredibly bad taste. Like, and I feel really bad for Matt because, he put in the time. He had, figured out what bullets best shot out of his gun and all this stuff. And when everything was all said and done, we'll go through finding them and everything. But like when everything was all said and done, I said, and that's why I bow hunt, because you don't even got a sight in your rifle. You just pick it up you just grab somebody else's gun, go out and shoot an elk. I told you guys it was just that easy. And
Matt's like, yeah, fuck you.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, what a dick. But yeah, so I mean, it was like a yard sale because I had all this stuff, and I'm like, and so anyways, I'm glassing, and then I see like in this brush pile, like what looks to be an elk, but he's laying the wrong way. So I'm like, man, is he like bedded up? Like I couldn't tell if his head was up and so like, I'm like on, and then I'm trying to get on the gun and back and forth. Like, can I see any better? I'm like, I don't know. It just looks kind of like that. So I called those guys and I was like, hey, I just shot a bull. Like, I'm pretty sure he's legal,
I'm pretty sure he's legal. I think he's dead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was the things that were going through my mind. And then I called Frank, and Frank's in a tree. And so he's like, what's up? And I'm like, I just shot a bull. I'm like, I had to shoot him with a gun. He's like, what? I'm like, I shot him with a gun.
But it was like going.
Oh.
You know, it was breaking up and shit, you know. So I was trying to be quiet.
Right. So then did you call me right after that then?
I didn't call you till I found him.
Oh, say, because I thought you said something about you just found him or.
Yeah. So I called those guys and they said, what do you want us to do? And I said, well, we'll just give it an hour. I'm like, I was thinking, because he went down like that, and when he was trying to get up, his back legs weren't working real awesome. I was like, well, he's going to be easy to track anyway. I mean, I don't think he's going to be going,
Far
up a long ways. So, I was like, we'll give it an hour. So I waited like, I don't know, I'd say like 10 minutes, just like on the glasses, like trying to figure out. And the thing that I saw that looked the most elkish over there hadn't moved and hadn't done anything. So I got out my stuff and I made some coffee and sat there and drank the coffee. And then
that's when you could have done the base map thing.
Yeah. I realized that now, John. It like literally didn't even cross my mind to do that. I like try and mark.
He needed caffeine.
I just needed like a minute, because I was like, I don't. Again, that was like the last thing that I expected to happen. I just expected to go over there and sit, like the day before. But actually, I figured that would have been a good spot that day, because the first day was sunny and nice, and that's when they shot those bulls. The day that Matt hit one over there, it was really sunny and nice. And the day before was like really shitty and and it was supposed to be a nice day. So it was like every day that it was nice, they saw bulls
or saw bulls.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I mean, it's going to be the best chance, but I never shot it. I mean, I shot a lot of M16s at 200 yards or whatever, but I've never shot at anything alive or, animals at over 100 yards, 80 yards, I think. So it wasn't my gun, I
just go to show you. Fucking gun hunting's too easy.
Well, and so it was just odd. But anyway, so I just finished up my coffee and they said, well, we're on our way. So I was like, well, I'll pack up my stuff and I'll go down there, because at least we'll have an idea of what's going on. So I packed up all my stuff and I went down there and saw the big old scuff mark, and I kept, my eyes and the gun over on where I thought there was a dead thing, which the blood led over there. So I was like, okay. And then I went in there maybe 20 yards or something, and then I seen the one front point, and I seen a split on the other side, and I was like, oh, he's legal and he's dead. So I went over there and I was like, okay, cool.
So is that what you were looking at? Was it him?
Yeah. But I could just see like the back of the butt section.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I ended up doing is that first shot, he was quartered to me,
mm-hmm.
and I had put it like behind the shoulder. Well, I pulled, and I must have pulled high, and so it went like right through like between his hips in the back and like out his asshole. Like,
so
wow.
So he broke his back and probably blew that artery, his rear arteries.
And so I would guess, but then he was like up like this, and when he died on his right side facing up. And so when they got there, I had him already halfway skinned.
Did you hit him any other time?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When we flipped him over, I just kind of like grazed him or whatever, because it looked like a beautiful shot, like behind the shoulder, on that right side that he was laying on, and that would have been the side that he was like going up the hill with. But there wasn't an exit wound on the other side. But when we took the heart out, there was like a 30 caliber graze, 30 caliber hole just on the other side of the heart. So it must have just went in and out that same thing, but where it went in and out was the only thing it hit in there was the heart. So
How far did he go then from the initial shot?
50 yards maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he bleed a lot?
Not really.
No.
Inside, there was a lot of blood. Like when because Kyle cut the heart out, he had a little saw and took the 2 ribs and just folded them down and cut the heart out, and it was just all full of blood. But we did the gutless method on that one too. So it was.
Did you get the inner loins?
It's cool. Yep. Kyle and his humor.
So Kyle shot the big bull, right?
Yeah, he shot a really big. It's like a 300-inch
6x6.
5x6.
5x6.
Yep, but it had both like the back points on it. It just didn't have one of the main points, but a ton of mass. Yeah. And then his dad shot a 5x4, and then I shot a 3x5, which.
So you guys went
is generous.
3 for 6.
Well, yeah, but they count Matt's as because once you draw blood,
you're done.
You're done, and so they count that as a kill. And then so after all was said and done, my dad was up on that knob, and he came down to get a cup of coffee. Like at lunchtime, and he seen everybody walking back, and he's like, what's going on? So he didn't even know that I shot a bull. So we're sitting down there, carrying on whatever. My dad had gone back up there, and all of a sudden we heard a shot up there, and he shot at a really nice bull. But on that side, it was all that oak scrub, and they just kind of like appear over the ridge, and then they disappear into that oak scrub. And, he was up there, realized that it was legal, and then tried to make a quick shot and just missed. But his rifle got banged around pretty good, he said, and he was missing like the rear scope cap on it. So he's like, I don't even know if it's still on, but sounds like an excuse to me. But I mean, it was an awesome experience. Like I said, that first day, just being able to, experience cutting them up and
breaking them down,
and getting your hands on them like that, and seeing it. And besides that, I bet you we saw that first day. I bet you we saw 30 elk or more, and it's one of the things where, what we did was awesome, but we didn't get to really observe any elk. It was a lot more like turkey hunting than it was like anything else. And this was really like whitetail hunting elk. It was just like sit there and wait. And they weren't, those guys heard a couple bugles the first day, and then we heard a couple other bugles. But the guys that were up there on that knob were thinking, because way off in the distance we could see a camp, and then over here we saw another guy walking around and stuff, and they thought that they were bugling, and so it was hard. They said it was like every 7 minutes, like on the dot, like bugle, 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 bugle. So they didn't know if that was really elk or if that was another guy.
So it was Doug Flutie out there.
Yeah. So, but they weren't there. I mean, they weren't rutting. They were just doing elk things. So being able to observe elk, and like I say, where we were at, there's a big knob and dark timber and, sporadic.
And a lot of elk.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're shooting, 5 guys got shots, right?
Mm-hmm.
One guy got 2 sets of shots,
Right.
So
with all that going on, and you're still now. So could you hear those guys shoot?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So you just didn't know.
Yeah, when we didn't know who was shooting, because there was, imagine, and this is something that I do.
Could you hear the other camp?
That's what was my question.
Yeah, you could hear the lodge shoot. Like where we were at, we could see the stable, but it was like miles away, And so like the one night when the the blizzard kind of like subsided, because there was another day that it snowed, and when that stopped and it got sunny, it was like, but it was a lot like opening day of rifle season, like on a smaller scale, just because there weren't so many people so close.
Mm-hmm.
But like that, what we did there, like having the camp and having the guys there and having the, like, you know, busting your balls and all that stuff, like that's something that I really miss, like from like when we used to go up to our camp and you know, back in the heyday. That was just super cool. I mean, imagine, you know, so we haven't heard too much about your elk hunt, but that must be like the way that it is with you guys with the camp.
Oh yeah,
you know?
yeah. It was, you know, we were, you know, 7 miles in from the trailhead. You know, it's all trails in there, but I mean, where we camped, we were 7 miles. In, you know, you had to ride a 4-wheeler in 7 miles. But the way our camp was set up, we had a like a cook tent, you know. And then we had the tent. We 4 of us slept in one, and then John and Brian slept in another tent. But we brought, you know, real food.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we ate good. You know, I had my flat top, my Pit Boss 22-inch,
Mm-hmm.
and then we had Chris bought me the Seth McGinn. That was
A long time ago, and you had never used it. That's
Never
the
used
can
it,
cooker.
dude. And it was the greatest thing you ever, you know, if you had chili or goulash or anything like that, just throw it in the Seth, man, and turn the burner on, you know, and it works great, you know. We had off of Dan's elk, we ate the inner loins wrapped in bacon, you know, on the flat top and stuff, you know. It was, but we cooked stuff. I made pancakes, you know, eggs, bacon, whatever, you know. I mean, we had a
What about
ball.
the hunting though?
The hunting was, you know, it's, you know, I think the first few days, you know, is the best because, you know, you just get, there's quite a few guys, you know, out there. And elk just get, and there's, you know, not numbers like where you were, you know. And, so, and we had some bulls bugling, you know, and I mean, you know, Dan had a nice bull come in, your brother, you know, and never got a shot at him. Had him at 28 yards, and you know, took off. Didn't get a shot. Brian missed a big 5x5 at 20 yards. Hit a tree, and he said the trees were like 3 feet apart. And we said, "Well, how'd you hit it?" "I don't know." He said, "I was shooting right in between them at 20 yards and hit the tree, and the arrow broke in two and was gone." And then
Shooting like I did.
Big John saw, you know, some spikes and cows and stuff, you know, and then moose. He got like 10 yards from a moose, dude. And it was doing the grunt thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Did you get a picture of John?" He goes, "Fuck no." I turned around and ran. He said, I was huffing it, man. He says,
You don't want to mess with them big dummies.
So then Danny Wilkes, he had a big cow come in with 2 spikes with her the one day, and he passed on her because he figured, you know, it was going to be too much of a bitch to get her out of there. Well, the elk that your brother shot was up above that.
Even farther.
Yes, it was farther yet. So Danny says, hell, we could have got this one out. I said, you know, hey, you know. And then Ern called the one in and had a cow at 20 yards, never got a shot. And then I never actually saw an elk, but I had him one bugling really close to us. Did
you hear that story? Clowns.
No, we were on this edge of this. I mean, it was a steep bitch going down this dark timber, And we were at, like right around 10,000 feet, on top of it. So what we did was we went up to the edge. I got down here and Ern was here, and then Danny was, back behind us, like turkey hunting, and he's calling and bugling, and we did this we sat there for, hour and a half. Then he came up and got us, and he said, well, let's just work our way down the ridge. We'll just work way back this way towards this one thing of meadows, So the whole time we'd go, 7,500 yards. We'd call and listen. Because we had heard a bull down below there earlier. That's why we had set up there. So we kept doing that, and more, time goes on. We get back to this one spot, where we're standing there. And Ernie looks down below and he goes, is that like a pond down there, water? And it was like a bit steep, And Dan goes, yeah, I think it is, And he looks at me and he goes, on a scale of 1 to 10, he says, you going down there or not? I said, fucking
Zero.
I said, 0, dude. I'm staying up here. I says, I'm not going down there just to look at that water. So him and Ernie said, okay, well, we'll go down there. You cut back across this it was like that kind of flattened out, and there was like a little valley there, and a valley on the other side. I said, I'll go over there and do some calling, because they were going to plan on sitting there till, dark.
Mm-hmm.
So they walked down there. They started down there, and I went over here. So I'm saying to myself, I'm sitting there, I'm going, well, I'm going to wait till Danny calls, before I do anything. So all of a sudden I hear the old bugle, okay, he's calling. So I started cow calling a little bit, and then I bugle, and bugle again, okay, so then I didn't hear him anymore, I kept calling a little bit, Then finally, it was getting toward dark. Well, they come up out of there, and then when we went all the way out and got on 4 wheels, then we had to go back to camp, which was probably a 30, 40 minute ride. I don't know, maybe more. Get back to camp, and we're sitting there eating, and bullshitting, and I said, yeah, I waited till you called, and he looks at me and he goes, I didn't fucking call. That wasn't me. I said, what? I said, yeah, it was. And he goes, no, I didn't call. He said, I thought it was you. And I goes, that sumbitch and bull had followed us all the way along there. You know what I mean? And then when we shut up, see?
He was looking for you.
Yeah.
It's like just like the turkeys.
And he ended up getting their wind, see?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going, Jesus Christ. Yeah, I said, yeah, I waited for you to call. And he goes, I didn't call.
Clowns.
Yeah. Well, then when they went in to get Dan's cow, the meat, they left me off kind of in the same place, but there was a creek that went down through there and stuff, and off this one meadow, and everything, So I get down in there and I set up, and because I figured they were going to be gone, a couple hours, So I'm down in there, and man, it was perfect. The wind was coming down to me, So everything up above and the dark stuff right up here, I figured, I had draw. So I hung my bow up on this tree, and I was sitting on a log, and I started calling. I did some cow calling, and then a bugle. And then I cow called a little bit more. All of a sudden, I hear this goddamn breaking shit coming down, to me. And then it was stopped, and I cow called a couple more times, started again. So I got my bow, I got her off the hook, and I got a gun ready, and then I didn't call no more, but it just like, I could hear it getting closer and closer and closer in the stick shit. All of a sudden, the frickin' wind just pulled up from behind me and just, goes in there, gone. Some bitch is gone, just like that.
Did you ever hear it? Besides, did it bark or anything?
No, So I think it was, just a bull and it got spooked, But and then, but everybody, it was it's a good trip, you know. I mean, we had a great camp, you know. The roads are a motherfucker, though. Oh my God, it's just like they're all rocks. I mean, the one place where Dan saw that 5x5 that he didn't get a shot at, and then that Brian shot at that other 5x5 that coming off that trail. The trail's a pain in the ass, but then you've got it's an hour and something, off the trail and getting them up them rocks back to camp and shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's it beats shit out of you, but
you're all public land. So
yeah.
Was the property you're on public land?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is it like landlocked, or can anyone?
Pretty much.
I was going to say, because, that many elk there like that,
Yeah.
It's just surrounded by privates.
I don't know how, like, I know the corner that we were on was landlocked, and I don't know how far it goes till there's like access. But so their stables that are up above, like right off of that, there's like a little gate. And as soon as you go off of that, and it's like maybe like 100 yards from where the edge of the horse pastures are. And then it's public, but
you can't.
I don't know how you would get in there.
Yeah. Helicopter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have them drop in.
Yeah. So
do they have like archery hunts too? Or is
they do. And so they do like fully guided or drop camp archery hunts, but it doesn't sound like they had too much interest in it. So they didn't do one out of that camp this year.
Really?
Yeah. But I think like what you're paying for is like access to the elk basically, and the ride in,
right?
Mm-hmm.
But
so you were liable to buy your own tags,
mm-hmm.
And that's just over the counter.
Yep. Well, it was a draw. It was a draw. Yep. And they said it was like, they said you didn't have to like put in for points or anything like that. But he said, so that particular hunt, that camp, he said is like booked out to like 2025 or something is the next opening. But he said he thinks by that time it'll require a draw. Like he said, it'll be a point. But I don't know. It exceeded my expectations, even maybe more so just for like the camp. But like being able to, like, we joke around, with Frank saying like, turkey's doing turkey shit. Like it was a real good experience to watch elk do elk shit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like we've been fortunate to, spend our whole lives watching deer do deer shit. I mean,
and we still can't figure that.
Yeah, I can't figure the deer shit out.
Things.
But
I guess we're fucked with it.
It was just cool.
And like going back to where we hunted. Well, you were on the other side last year over there.
Mm-hmm.
We went the other 10 days, but where this is, and I say, I think the hunting the first 3-4 days, is going to be the best. But what we tried to do was, we'd go into a place where we'd find elk or elk sign, a lot of it, and then we would hunt there, and then we'd go back to camp, and do that hour and a half or whatever, you know what I mean, on them trails. So next year, what we plan on doing is getting bigger, tents for yourself, you know what I mean, to make it more comfortable, more livable, you know what I mean, instead of, sleeping in a tube or whatever, you know what I mean.
The burrito?
Yeah, gonna get a regular, like a guide tent, you know what I mean. And when we do find the elk, we're gonna have enough stuff, where we can stay there for a couple of days or whatever, at that point, we're just gonna go. So when you come out of the woods at night, you just get in your tent, you know what I mean. You don't have to, get on the 4-wheeler and go back and, eat and then you're, you know what I mean? Cause you're spending a lot of time traveling and then, the other,
Mhm.
so.
Well, I mean, think about that first year when we were in Ohio, like how whooped we were from all the travel.
Oh yeah.
I mean, not John. He was done hunting, drinking, and
yeah.
all that stuff.
Going to lodges and stuff, But, I mean, what I'm saying is I think we could make it a lot more easy on on yourself, you know what I mean, by doing this. Cause Danny and I and Aaron talked about it, and we're going to change up a little bit, like I said, I mean, go with a little more gear, you know what I mean? And a little more comfortable gear for being out there like that, But the camp worked out great. I mean, we had that was cool, that big tent, and it was nice, And then doing the cooking right there, and everything, it was really convenient.
So, John, on a scale of 1 to 10, how disappointed are you in me?
Well, I wouldn't say disappointed. I'm just, when I think about it, it's kind of like you actually said it. What I was thinking, like, well, he's going with his bow, but on the last day he's going to say, "Screw it, I'm just going with the gun." And so it's like, and I understand you couldn't just go down in there and hunt like you wanted because you'd end up blowing out the property, basically, of that valley for everybody in the group. So so I guess you weren't selfish in that point, but I probably would have been. No, but no, I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to come home. Well, I've done it a few times now, but
it wasn't.
I've done it twice.
But it wasn't like you were also like you could have shot one with it. If you'd have just had a gun, you would have shot him, but you opted not to. Or it would. I guess the only thing I would say, it would almost be like saying, well, we only shoot, branch bulls, and we don't shoot spikes or cows. And like, oh, I passed on a cow because I'm only going to shoot a bull. Or, like having the opportunity to kill something, you know what I mean? And,
right.
and not, and like I said, it's just like the way that it happened is just like the furthest thing from like, it wasn't like there were all these elk out there that we saw every day at the same place. And it was like, okay, well, now I just go out there with a gun. I mean, in truth, it's kind of like the way that it happened, but it wasn't just a given. I mean, obviously my dad missed, Matt struggled. I don't know.
I was trying to look up, because last time I looked at my Montana alternate list, I was 39.
Oh.
And that was a couple weeks ago. So I could be basically, and I think the season goes to November 28th.
I'll tell you this though. One of the things where I just wanted to like kind of like drive home on this whole thing with like doing that camp that way, and like aside from getting to see elk do elk stuff and kind of get a better idea of like how they use the land, was really kind of, and getting to break down elk and getting the experience, getting hands on all of that. But getting to like test your gear, I had zero expectation of like all the snow and the weather and like dealing with that. Like I knew like my lower body, like my pants situation wasn't like the warmest, but I was like, oh, it'll probably be fine. I'll figure it out. I was fucking cold. and then like the day that I was out all day, like in a blizzard, like I think about that. Like, you remember talking to Greg Litzinger when he was talking about he went out there and like got, a couple feet of snow on them, and they were just like you and I were, like tents on your back and all that stuff. Could you imagine like not having a fire or and being X amount of miles from wherever? Like, you'd just be screwed.
Right.
Like not being able to dry out your gear.
Yeah,
it would
absolutely
be awful. And so that was also like a very like beneficial thing, like being able to take that away. And I was thinking about like almost like a better way if you were going to do that, like, and there was a possibility of that, like later in the year, more likelihood, like instead of going in like I did with just like a couple of like base layers and then like an outer shell, you're 23. 23 on the list.
23 on the list.
Would be to like go with like just like a regular pair of pants and like a light pair of merino like leggings or whatever, thermals, and then have like a pair of puffy pants and then like rain pants, to block the wind or whatever, if you weren't going to be moving around. And I mean, I've heard like Brunella and Giannis talk about that, but I'm like, I can totally see why that would be like the way to go.
Why couldn't you do like a set of Gore-Tex bibs or something?
You're talking weight and packing stuff.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
but then then you'd also like
it's a single use.
Yeah, you'd be trapping all of that heat. You couldn't walk around in them. You'd have to like get undressed to put them on.
Well, they make the stuff breathable too. So if you had some base layers and a fairly light set of, like that, that you could wear, and it would take care of the wind, for you.
Yeah. But I think, John, being like the weight and packability and all that.
I think you'd be better off, like what Adam's saying, you layer it and you use your rain gear as a multi, because that's two things instead of just the one, because then that way it's blocking the wind. You got enough layers underneath, and then it's just pop it off, roll it up, put it in your pack.
Then you're moving, and then when you're stopped,
it's quick, put it back on. Where bibs, you'd be undressing.
Yeah, I suppose.
And that's more of a single use.
But it was like a really good opportunity to find like holes in my system, like of like what you need, what you don't need, like how
we're used. I mean, the trips that we've taken before were just early season, so
yeah,
and it got cold, but we were also walking the whole time.
Mm-hmm. It got cold when we were out there. Last year it snowed, but this year it didn't snow, but it hailed a lot, the one day, rain, hail. Oh man, Danny was up on the mountain that day. He was gone like 7 hours, and when he came back, he was soaked. But now, did everybody use jet boils?
Yeah, and that was another thing. Like, it was just like the way, like we didn't like plan out like the way that, we didn't. My dad, he had just like my little stove and cup from before, and he didn't even use it ever.
No,
no, it was just one of those things where we.
Did you get the bigger one?
Consolidated. Yeah, I have a Camp Chef one that's like similar to what you've got.
Maple Fire.
Yeah,
or whatever it is, Fire Maple one.
Yeah, it's like a 1 liter deal. But yeah, I mean, everybody had jet boils. Everybody, like we could have.
So it was pretty redundant.
Everything was redundant. It was just everybody was set up to be self-sufficient, except for we hunted in pairs and we all ate together. So,
right. So like you could have brought half the jet boils.
Right.
Figured out the food ahead of time. Like, okay, you guys are on meal 1. Mm-hmm. We're on meal 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That way we carry it in.
See, that's what we did when we went to camp, we planned, each person planned a meal, Well, and most of the time you do a meal and you would have an extra meal, you know what I mean, of the same kind for another day, you know what I mean, because you made enough, you know, like if we had goulash, you know what I mean, your brother brought goulash. Well, we had enough for two days, you know, and then John brought chili, you know, and after a day or so, we mixed the two of them together too, you know what I mean, and
then you guys had to fucking have nose plugs for the gas that was coming out of the can.
Nah, his chili wasn't that you know bad,
Well,
but I mean,
just imagine
when we put the goulash in, it was really good, you know. So I mean, but then you know, I had I made those scrambles, you know, and then I brought sausage gravy. I brought a Ziploc bags full, you know, gallon Ziplocs full of that stuff, you know, flat, you know.
Now, did you bring that in a cooler? Or
yeah, we brought it in a cooler, you know, and then
they made 8 trips. You know?
No,
did you see the pictures of what they took in? Like that red trailer that he's got, like it's just like your regular like yard cart. He slimed the wheels. They got like, how far were you from camp?
I was about a mile from where it would have been. I probably made it 6 miles.
Blew a tire, and then just drug the fucker the rest of the way.
And I never made it to camp, and it tore the wheel. Right, yeah, tore the axle off and shit. You know,
so it was a sled. Now
it was on one side. You know, the wheel was good on the other side. And finally, I just we unloaded it, and they took the rest of the shit to camp. You know, and I threw that sumbitch off the side of the road. You know, I was going to leave it out there. You know, and then we made it to camp with all the rest of the gear that I had too. You know, and then a couple days later, we were going to go back out and take a shower. So I threw it on the trailer and drugged that sumbitch down and threw it off by the trailhead there by our big trailer, and then it stayed there the rest of the time. We just threw it in the trailer and brought it back, and I revamped it again. You know,
be ready
welding on it, and
it's like this.
I put a set of lawnmower front tires,
the spindles and everything. You welded the spindles to it.
Yeah, I just took the spindles. I had them on, the wheels, and I just cut them off on there and weld them on. And
you know what you need to do?
He didn't have an angle finder though, because
I tried straightening the axle. You know, I had a fucking sledgehammer and I was hitting that thing. I didn't heat it, but I was hitting it, and then I welded the thing that it tore off the part of the frame. And
you need to get an old front end off a quad with the tires and mount that, so you have independent suspension on your trailer.
Well, the trailer
with the tires,
the trailer that Danny and I rigged up, he's got it's a small trailer. It's got bearings in the wheels. You know what I mean? And we took I had some 1-inch oak boards, and we put that down as a deck on it. You know, it was 4 foot wide, maybe 4 or 5 foot long, and then the wheels, and then it came to the front, but it's like a trailer hitch, goes on a ball, and that's what we, loaded the big tent and all that big cooler on and all that stuff, that worked great. Couldn't go very fast, but I mean, he kept his wheels.
So what's the terrain like? I mean, that road, you said the road's bad, but is it like tip over bad? Is it
not the
like any of the trails?
Yeah, fucking A. I tripped over, It was slow-mo though. I mean, it was like, Ernie come running down the hill, and it was the quad's laying on me and shit, and I can't get out from underneath it. It's got me pinned up to the bank, and he comes out and he's like, "Oh my God," he's pushing. I said, I'm all right, dude, Got her up, hit the thing, boom, fired it up, all right. Just got one of them deals where, I took it a little bit different. It was a little hairpin, and there was kind of a big rocker, and it just hit the back tire, and it was like, I knew it was going to go, but just no. And John did it last year, with that quad he had. Shit, that one he's got now, though. Huh. That thing is a monster. It's an 850
Mm-hmm.
850 Can-Am. And this thing is, Johnny, it sounds just like when they'd start them up 4 a.m, like a goddamn Harley. I ain't kidding you. It was like,
Well, that's got the V-twin in it.
oh yeah, well, your brother, excuse me, when they came back from, they hunted that spot in one spot. So it took them to come all the way out that trail, then up to camp. Dan, your brother, had to go make a phone call, right? It was about unemployment. So ends up, John's keys for his truck are in camp.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you got to take the truck across the dam to get service. You know, you can't ride the 4-wheelers over there.
Mm-hmm.
So Dan's going to go down back. And this is after dark, you know, and it's 7 miles, like I said, out to the trailhead. And John said, just take my quad, Dan. He said, really? He goes, oh yeah, just take mine. So, you know, we make supper and everything. Dan left, you know, we're making supper and stuff. And he ain't gone. Shit. All of a sudden, I hear this, you know, and it's Dan. I'm going, you didn't go out? Hell yeah, man. He said, I went all the way. He said, this thing is unbelievable. He says, you know those cattle crossings? He says, you're airborne, you know? He did that trail, dude. He goes, this thing is like, you know, it's got all independent suspension on it and stuff. He said, what a ride. He was just like, I don't know. He had to set a land record, you know, a land speed record going out and back. But yeah. So the 350 Rancher's not going out again next year.
No.
2 years of that ass pound is enough, you know what I mean, with a straight axle, you know.
Right.
So, but it did the job, believe me. You know, I mean, that thing is like, I had no problem with it. Ernst said yours works really good, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna put new tires on it this year. I'm gonna get those. I think they're the Sawtooth, whatever Doc has on his quads out there. Those real aggressive ones.
Danny Wilkes put some new ones on his last year, and it worked really good.
And these ones, all of Doc's quads had these. They're like, I think they were called a Sawtooth, and they're like so stiff. Like he said that. Well, he fills them with the green slime too, but they're so stiff that he's like, you can rip a hole in the side and you don't even need air.
Yeah. But, well, and like I say, I'm looking for something more horsepower, you know what I mean? And then independent suspension. That's going to be the next purchase in the spring. But it's, you know, I mean, it's different, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of 4-wheeler traffic out there in those trails that are just people just riding 4-wheelers. They're not hunting, or they could be fishing, or, you know, anything, you know. But there's, you know, and you think about it, we had elk encounters close to those trails because those elk are used to it, you know. They're used to hearing them 4-wheelers and stuff out there, you know. They just stand there and, you know, let them go by, you know.
Wait for you to stop, bugle.
Yeah.
Like, I ain't answering him. Take off.
Last year, Dan and John had, you know, 5x5 right on the trails because they, you know, they weren't all ready and stuff, and then all of a sudden they start calling, boom, there he is, you know. And they're fumbling around trying to put releases on and stuff like that, you know. And he's 30 yards from them. So, but yeah, it's a you know, I've learned a lot in the last 2 years out there like that, you know. And
so you're going back to Colorado again next year?
I'm yeah.
And then what's your overall take on this trip? Would you do it again?
I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Now, if it came to a bow hunting trip like we did, or this gun trip, if you could only do one, next year, which one would you do?
Oh man, that's a tough one because I really, really, really want to kill one with a bow, and not that I don't enjoy like the hunt that we did, but just having like the camp, like it's weird. Like that was more important than any of like the elk stuff. Like it makes me like want to go do like a big deer camp again because that was
It was more about the hanging out.
it was way more about the hanging
yeah.
out. But that to say, like the location was amazing.
So we should have the deer camp podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. But and
Or
like,
hunt camp.
like I say, I went out there and I told those guys when I went, this year, I says, because Ernie's already, he says, you got to get on the treadmill, Frank. You got to ride your bike. I said, bullshit. I said, I don't need to do none of that, Ern. He goes, well, what are you. And I go, I'm going to have a good time, I said, okay? If I get a shot at an elk or kill an elk, that's a bonus, dude. I said, what I'm going for is the experience. You know what I mean? It's a great bunch of guys. I said, it's, you're out there at, in the mountains, we farted around and caught brook trout, out of this lake and stuff, you know what I mean? Shit like that, But it was like, I go because that's what I want to do. That's what I like. And I do it at my pace. You know what I mean? I don't have to run up fucking mountain, behind some young stud, you know what I mean? And have my heart sticking out of my throat and shit. I don't need that,
But what did you say though? You said when you got back you were gonna
I'm gonna be in better shape next year. Don't get me wrong.
Because that's gonna make your experience even that
much
much
better. You
Right.
know what I mean?
And I think that's what Ernie was, I think, maybe trying to get to.
Yeah, I guess, but
But like the thing is like I would love like to go back to Idaho and do that hunt again, or do something similar like in Montana. Because the craziest thing about that hunt in Idaho wasn't that we saw elk or whatever, is that we didn't see another motherfucking person.
Right. And so that's like my thought process on that too. Is, I mean, it's the same. Like, and I said this to Ed and the other people that we talked about, elk hunting. It's like, I would much rather go to a spot that has less elk, but no people, which, I mean, it's getting harder and harder and harder.
yeah, that's
But-
just like
But like where we went in Montana, it was just like that first spot we hunted, it was nothing but people. We didn't even see elk. There was a ton of elk sign. And the kid that we ran into was like, oh yeah, I seen a bunch of elk here opening week, but they just got chased over into Idaho.
Right, right.
And
So I'd do that hunt again in a heartbeat, and especially now, like how much more do we know, or how much more have we learned about ourselves, about gear, about elk hunting, about like what we need to do. Like I feel like that would be an amazing experience to go do that again.
Yeah. Well, my plan is to go. I mean, obviously, I didn't experience the gun camp or the spike camp part, but like hunting with Ed last year, that was basically the same. The first week or the first few days, the first spot, that's what we did. We packed in with our, everything. Of course, Mark didn't really like that spot and didn't like that style. But then, the second week, we did a kind of a happy medium. We could have had a nice camp. We camped at the bottom of the mountain and then just, drove in every day, which if we would have had a camper, because that's what they did when we were in Idaho, they were in Montana in that very spot doing the same thing, but they had Eddie's big camping trailer, which.
Well, what if you had a tent though? A big tent.
Right, but you're in grizzly country, so that's what you're not going to want to camp and cook and do all that stuff right next.
So you want steel walls as well.
Yeah. And steel walls might not even, but that's the thing there. So you're not going to have a big cook shack and doing all that. There was guys that were attacked there the year before last. Yeah. And that year there was 2 guys or a camp that the bear come in twice. So it's not going to be the same,
Yeah.
You're not going to be in there having a cook shack and cooking bacon and
pancakes. And then the old saying, I wish Wilkes was going to come tonight and he didn't make it. But we were going to talk about, what happened on our hunt out there. But he was filming a cinnamon bear. And it was a big one too. It was over 350, and he said he stopped. He had it on his phone and he stopped. For some reason, he said, I wanted to get a still of him. And he took a still picture. And just when he did, it's the old thing is, does a bear shit in the woods? Well, this one hiked up and like he's got the still of the diarrhea just shooting out of this all the way to the ground. And he said it was really loud. This bear's like 20 yards away. It was really loud. And after he did it, he kind of like farted a few times. And then he said the bear kind of just like looked around. Did anybody hear that? And then he kept walking. But then he was later on after the bear left and he went down there and he had his boot and it was this is a long shit there,
Jeez. That's right up.
So it was funny.
But as far as like between the two, like the camp was amazing. Like that was just as much of the hunt as it was actually hunting. That was a great experience. And I was thinking about it, like I think I said to those guys on the way back, like that would have been a perfect hunt for, like, if Christopher was going to do an elk hunt, like that's the way to do it. Like my brother Drew, that would be his jam. Mm-hmm. Like it was enough hunting that you were like, I got to see a bunch of elk, got to shoot some elk.
Right.
It wasn't cookie cutter for you.
Right.
Like you could have made it as hard or as not hard as you wanted.
But would you really, it's not really comparable. I'm not trying to be a dick or anything, but
oh no.
It's not like hunting to me. Like as a way we hunted.
Yeah.
We went out and hunted. We went out and looked and went after the elk on our own. We had a little bit of guidance, but I guess that's what you're paying for.
You're
paying for them to be brought in, but they're also like, okay, sit here, or they pointed out the spots, and those were the spots that you killed down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it was just like, get up in the morning, walk out, sit in your spot, see them, shoot them.
But I think that's like I said, I would put that just in the same sense of like, unless you're Hal Blood or somebody along those lines, like that's the way rifle hunting is, to some degree, because you see them, you shoot them,
right?
So you just have to locate them, and when you take the locating them out of it, then it's like, well, then you just kill them. So to your point, yes. Yeah, but it's also like, I would say, if you were to do that same hunt in archery season, it would be you would have to hunt them, because you wouldn't just be able to sit. You'd be like, if you sit here, you can see elk 300 yards away,
right?
Exactly.
So you'd still have to, you know what I mean? Like, I think what you're paying for is like access to. But the elk.
In retrospect to what you're saying, you're going to archery hunt those elk in the same state, so you're going to be 1 month you're going to have. You know what I mean? You have the month of September.
Right.
So they're going to be more susceptible to call. You know what I mean? And hopefully not spooked. It didn't sound like those elk were spooked where you were at. You know?
Well,
No, so it'd be interesting to talk to that outfitter about like the archery season.
well,
I mean, because like Frank's saying, you're gonna get in there, and if there's that many elk and there's not that many people,
right.
Exactly.
now I can go in there and call, and you're gonna have a really good opportunity to call in some bulls and maybe pick out the herd bull, not just kill any.
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly.
But okay, so
And so that would be
ideal.
would spike my interest there.
yeah, but
Right.
but that's what I'm gonna say. Like, so think about it. Like from that perspective, is like what I'm saying, or like my point was with like being able to just watch elk in their like native, things, and I would have to imagine that this is not. Well, I can tell you that this wasn't like a banner year for elk, success there. Like this is just, they're usually 50% or above. They usually do real well right there. So those elk, the population isn't changed. Like we didn't affect the population of elk
Right.
there. So, it would be like you said, like an ideal opportunity to go in there and practice calling, and it's almost like a captive audience, to some degree. Like, be super cool. It would be the same thing. Like best case scenario, getting into a place where nobody hunts essentially.
Right.
But
and that's just the opposite of where we're at. You
Right.
know.
they've been called to.
But you can still call them.
And that's like what happened with that spot where I was at, where I shot my bull. I mean, I pretty much put the calls away. As soon as I hit, the night before, as soon as I hit the cow call, they all took off running like, whoa, what the fuck was that? They had heard it so much because that's all 2 days before that, had guys following me up the mountain thinking I was an elk. And it's like, yeah, buddy, I'm terrible at calling. And you think I'm the bull? Let me get out the turkey calls.
Yeah, and we had your brother had a couple guys, chasing him,
Right.
and they finally figured out that it was a guy, but they had come quite a ways.
They got Doug Flutie.
Yeah, but just across from camp, that's where Dan Jr. went that day. That he was up there for like 7 hours, but that bull just kept bugling up there on the side of that mountain. He says, if he keeps it up, I'm going. But it's like this, and it's to get to him. You go down first across the road, and you say, well, cross the creek. Well, it's like down to the creek, steep here, cross the creek. Then it's up the other side, then it's up the mountain,
So if you kill something,
he was up there, like I said, almost, he was within, I don't know how far from the top, but he was close,
Did you see the bull?
He never got to see him, but he called in the cow and 2 spikes, and he could have shot, all 3 of those,
So and then the other Dan shot one farther up than that.
Your brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
So
actually.
did they have to pack him out?
Yeah. It was actually, we went in from the other side though.
So
we went
how
in.
far of a pack out on your packs?
It was probably, I don't know, I'd say a couple miles, Yeah. It was where he saw the bear,
Mm-hmm.
and then farther,
Okay.
and Dan and Dan went in there because we kept looking at it on the maps and stuff, and found that you could come in from this other way and it was easier to get to, but you still, it was down too, once you got in there. But it was, Danny said, knowing what I do now, he said, I should have shot her,
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I mean, hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah, I know. But it was, there, and it's just a thing, where, if you find an elk sign, then, that's what we're going to try and do next year. We're just going to camp on it. You know what I mean? Or where we can just walk out, get out of your tent and go.
Right. So you're going to have a base camp.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have a little pack.
Right.
Well, the difference is that they've got 4-wheelers. So on the 4-wheeler, he can have, because he wants a big enough.
Yeah.
Because Ernie was in the tents like ours, and he was claustrophobic.
Oh man, Ernie, I thought was going to tear the tent up.
Yeah.
Oh, last year. Yeah.
So they're going to have one of the Cabela's guide tents, like a big 3-man plus dome tent.
Yeah.
On their back of the 4-wheeler. That's what he said, a little bit more comfortable.
Right. You know what I mean? And
you could take my Sam's Club 12-man pop-up.
But the totes we have on there, you can have all your gear in them. You know what I mean? Food, whatever, water, gas. You know what I mean? We've got them rigged, where you can, once you get out there, like I said, you can, if you find what you're looking for, then just right by your quad, just set up your tent, and that's what them guys, some of them do, but they drive pickups back in some of them spots. Some of those roads are accessible for trucks or vehicles. They're nuts, man.
You need the Doc's freaking
Samurai.
Yeah, the Suzuki.
Yeah,
winches front and back, freaking rock crawling tires. It's like a little
these guys
beast.
The one dude had a Toyota back in there. Truck and he had a teepee set up. It was a pretty big one too. Them teepees that was set up. That was his camp. Back by a reservoir back there.
It's probably one of those freaking shoot.
Oh yeah. Like the Kafaru or
Kafaru teepee.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big son of a bitch.
What do they call that? Is it they call it the TP? Whatever it is, it's Kafaru has one. That's,
I've been looking at a couple different ones. There's that
they throw a stove in it. And,
yeah.
Oh yeah, he had heat and stuff like that. But the tent we used, it's it was a military tent, I think. But they made them they're made in Iowa.
Did you have a wood stove in it or?
No, we just had it's a fair-sized propane heater, hooked to a 20-pound tank. And you just had three heat settings that you could keep it on pilot and then low, medium, high. But god damn, man, you turn that thing on and it's just that tent gets so hot in there, it was stifling almost, I mean, you had to shut it off. Even when it was down in the, in the high 30s, low 40s.
Did you have a carbon monoxide detector in there? Was there enough air gaps to get some fresh air in?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hell yeah. And I would leave the flap open even, leave it. They would cinch it up, and I'd have to get up, piss, and I'd mess around with that thing. Finally, I just left it open.
So what else you got, John?
That's it. I was just wondering if you could do it again or not.
I'd do it again for the camp. I mean, if I could do the same thing at our camp in Baldwin or in the UP or whatever, just for literally the the camaraderie and all of that. Like I said, aside from the fact that, is a beautiful place, like the view and all of that stuff. But yeah, it was just super cool. Like, cause back when I was growing up and that was the heyday of Michigan rifle season, and there was, that 1 or 2 inches or that dusting of snow on the ground, and there was that like added bit of like suck, like where you come in and you're all wet and you're looking for a hot meal. You know what I'm saying?
Well, not so.
Well, like some of the camps that we bow hunted up there,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd make the chicken and dumplings. I did all the cooking for these guys. You know what I mean? It was like, they take me because I cook. But
it just really took me back to like when I was a kid almost.
So I guess I never got to experience that. So I remember looking forward to, like, that's all my dad ever did.
Yeah.
Like, they go to the UP and they had this big camp, and I always heard all the stories. And of course, the year I turned 14, the year before I turned 14, they had a big falling out.
Yeah.
I think it was over like a jar of peanut butter or something stupid, or, just some dumb shit. But so I'm like, well, I'm going to be 14, and now we don't get to go to the hunting camp that I've heard about for my whole life. So we drove up, just the two of us, and I think we ended up actually pulling over there.
Yeah.
We stopped, and he went in and talked to him for a minute, but then the weather was so bad, we hunted opening morning. I could have shot a spike horn, but I didn't. And then we drove back, and we drove back to Free Soil to Fred and Kathy's cabin, and ended up staying there. And then he left and went back home and left me up there with Kathy and Fred. So I was like, well, and then the next year, we didn't do anything. I ended up killing a deer out behind my house.
Oh yeah, I remember
the little 6-point.
Remember the big one you got though?
Well, yeah. So I killed a little 6-point. So we had the black mamba. The old
station wagon.
The old station wagon.
Yeah.
And Dad and I were going to go hunting out back behind the house. Well, it was actually like school was canceled. I was going to hunt anyway, but school was canceled. So we got a ton of snow, and he's like, "Oh, I'll just go back to bed." I'm like, "No, I'll go hunting." He's like, "Well, just drive the car out there. Here, I'm only 15, but it's just through the field out back." And it snowed so much I couldn't even find my tree, like where I'd normally hunted. Everything was different. So I just ended up walked out. I'm like, "Oh, this looks like it." I just sat down, and the 6-point comes running through, stops, shoot it, runs off, dies. Went over there, looked at it. I'm like, I killed a 6-point. I run back to the car, drive back up to the house. Dad's still sleeping. I'm like, "Dad, I killed a buck." He's like, "No, you didn't even go hunting. Go back to bed." I'm like, "No, I did. I killed." And so he got up. Well, and then the next year, I went up with Uncle Art and Uncle Ray to the old spot, that you and Dad used to hunt.
Right.
And ended up, I killed a nice 8-point out of actually Dad's old blind. Like, I was actually sitting on the point. I had no idea, but I was supposed to sit in Danelle's blind, and there was already someone there. So I just walked across, and when I explained where I shot the deer from, Dad's like, "Well, there's old blind there, wasn't there?" I'm like, "Well, there's remnants of one." He's like, "Well, that was my blind."
On the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next year was when I went out back and had my girlfriend with me at the time.
Yeah.
And I sat underneath Dad's tree. Well, so I played hockey. Well, Dad was actually down at the rink.
He was at the rink.
It was like draft night or something. He was down there watching. And I had to go down later to play. So I'm like, well.
He shoots his deer, calls me up. So I go over there.
He had the old Jeep truck.
Yeah. So we get to get the deer out and everything, right? This is a dandy too, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's my big 10 point.
Yeah. And he goes, I says, all right. He's going down to the rink, And I says, put the balls in a brown paper bag. I says, and take them down and give them to your dad.
So I did. So I put them in a baggie. And I remember, I just told this story last week. And I'm like, I go walking in and I remember him. He was standing at the end of right by the Zamboni watching, sitting there, looking out over the ice. And I walk up, I hand him that bag. He's like, what's this? I'm like, I shot your buck. He's like, what? I said, look in the bag. He looks in the bag. He's like, what is that? I said, that's his nuts. I shot your buck. He's like, bullshit. I'm like, no, serious, look in there. So he looks and he's like, God damn it, you little son of a bitch.
He was pissed.
He's like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, it's a huge 10 point. I said, Uncle Frank, come over to help me gut him out, and he's hanging in his garage. Of course, this is before cell phones, so I couldn't show him a picture of it. But oh yeah, he was pissed at first.
Yeah.
Then he was like, seriously, you got him? I'm like, yeah.
I said, take his nuts down there.
Hand him a big old bag of nuts.
Bag of nuts.
These nuts.
So it seems like I feel like a therapist. Like now I know why you don't like gun hunting, because you're like, well, I didn't get to go to.
Well, that was the whole thing. I never got to experience.
Go to King.
And I just every deer that I freaking killed with him was like I seen him and shot him. Like there was no so.
But there was nobody around. It wasn't like there wasn't a big fanfare. It wasn't.
It was just like. I shot him, I killed him, I got him, I mounted him. They're on the wall, and they're still hanging in my dad's house to this day. Like that 5 point, the 6 point, that first year, that was awesome. Like that was, the first buck I'd killed, and it was a spot where I was supposed to be hunting. I'd bow hunted it. I actually missed that buck. I didn't miss him. I had him come in during bow season, and I'd watched him. I was sitting right behind the house out the back of the field.
Right.
And I'd seen some other does come out, and I was shooting the old, what was that old flipper rest? Is it it had the plastic freaking, oh shit, what was that rest? Hunter Supreme rest? Can't remember. It had like a little plastic flipper though that stuck up. Well, when you draw it back, or when you're sitting there, my arrow would fall off. So I pushed it down inside, and to hold it.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden, I hear something down to my right, and I look down, and here's a buck, and he's like literally underneath my tree, like 6 yards. And I'm like, it's a buck. And I go to draw back, and it's still in the freaking inside the rest.
Pulled it off the string.
So it went, but when I pulled it back, though, it went, and I still didn't realize it. And that buck looked up at me, and I'm like, I pull it back the rest of the way, and it hits the shelf, and boom, and the arrow falls off and almost hits the deer on the ground, like, shoot, boom, and he takes off. Well, I remember, looking at him, and there was only so many, there weren't very many deer out back.
Right.
But it had, a little, one of its brow tines was, kind of buttoned. And when I shot that buck with my gun, that was it.
That was the one.
And so, and then the next year, like I said, I just went up. My cousin Jeff was like, hey, you want to come up hunting with us? I'm like, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And I went up, and, I was supposed to sit in my cousin Danielle's
right.
blind, and when I walked out, they're like, literally, we drive out this 2-track, and they're like, drop someone off, like, okay, this is where you get out. Just walk straight back there, and you'll find a blind. Get in it and sit there. Well, when I got back there, there was someone smoking. I could see a cherry of a cigarette. I'm like, oh man, someone's already in there. Now what the hell do I do? Because I don't want to get shot by this guy.
Right.
And I can't go walking up and down the 2-track because they're all up and down the 2-track. So that's when I just walked straight away from him, that person, crossed the true track, started getting light. I could see that there was like a opening out there. It ended up being that bowl and that point.
Right.
And I sat down right on top of that, and I actually seen a 4-point. Was because they're out in that bowl. There was a big ass oak tree, like right in the middle of it,
Mm-hmm.
and I seen a tail flicker, and then all of a sudden, like I seen its head, and I'm like, "That's a buck," It's a 4-point. I'm gonna shoot this sucker,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sitting there waiting, and he just kept feeding behind it, never gave me a shot, and then all of a sudden I hear something coming down the ravine to my left, and here comes 5 bucks. I'm like, swear to God, $5, like running in a row. They stop the first one. I shoot the first one. Boom. The rest spread out. And there was another one that was even bigger than the one I shot, he went into like these slashings. And I had racked another shell, and I'm like, man, I should shoot, but there's trees there. I'm not going to, but I could see his whole silhouette and body and everything. And then it felt like forever. Then he took off, and I didn't shoot. I was like, and then I ran down to where, I'd shot the first one. And I'm looking around, and I see there's a freaking tree with a hole in it. I'm like, oh my God, I shot a tree, I couldn't find blood, and I'm looking around, but I'm just like looking on the ground. Like, I'm not looking up or anything. And then finally I see a speck of blood on a leaf, like just a little tiny speck. And I'm like, so I start to follow it, and I look up, and I can see his like legs sticking up. He'd went into them same slashings and hit a log and was dead. Well, I'd shot right through a freaking tree about 2 inches big around,
Oh, yeah.
like, and that was with just a regular. So my dad had given me, I had like some regular, like the regular tip bullets. And then they had some big, like 180 grain, like he's like, yeah, these ones are shoot through brush and stuff or something, and that was my second shot. So I know I would have, when I told Dad about it, he's like, oh my God, he should have just shot. You would have killed him. No problem.
So what caliber were you using then?
The 7 mag.
7 mag? Oh, yeah. Shit. That shoots through everything, man. I shot through one of them ironwood trees out to the farm. It was probably almost 4 inches in diameter. I shot, the buck was probably 15, 20 feet behind that tree, and I didn't even realize that I'd shot that tree. I shot, and he went right down, When I went over there.
Do you have 2 holes in him?
No, I went over there, though, and it was like he's laying in this little indent, little hole, like. And I looked back, and I'm thinking, man, that was quite a shot, too, there, like that. And all of a sudden, I see all this white shit on the back of this tree, I walk over there, and I center punched that tree, dude. I center punched it, and it blew out the back, and he had shrapnel in him, you know what I mean, in his rib cage.
Right.
Oh, yeah, it hit him in 3-4 spots right
that's
there.
That's what I meant.
Right behind the front leg. Yeah.
So that's what happened with that buck, too.
Yeah.
It had 2 spots where it fucking went.
Oh, yeah.
The bullet already fragmented.
Oh, yeah, this thing, and it broke his back right there. It hit him right high in the shoulder, right behind the leg, kind of like right there. But it broke his back, man, just killed him instantly, just plop.
Well, so then when I found that buck, though, I looked up on the other side of the bowl, and there's another dude up there in orange up on the other side. I was like, and so what was funny is the next day, my cousin Jeff, I'm like, well, let's go sit back in that same spot. Maybe there'll be more. Yeah, they're in the next county at that point. But we ended up running into the guy that was sitting on the other side. He was walking the next day.
Yeah.
He's like, you guys hunting, I'm like, yeah, I killed a buck down here yesterday. He's like, oh, you shot that little 4-point? I'm like, no, I killed a nice 8-point. And he didn't believe me because he was watching that 4-point and thought I had shot that one. And then the next year, I just walked out and sat underneath Dad's tree, his bow hunting tree with my girlfriend,
right,
watching 2 does, had the gun in my left hand, like shouldered left-handed, watching these does. And I kept hearing something to my left, but I couldn't look around because she was sitting next to me on my left. And I couldn't like see around her. Finally, I heard like a branch snap, and I leaned out because I didn't want to spook those does either, but they had at that point kind of moved on. And I looked out, and all of a sudden there that buck was, and he was only like 30 yards feeding across that field. And I just like lost it. I was like, oh my, I started shaking, and she freaking started cracking up. Like, because I was so freaking funny, like, shut up. Well, the deer looked up, and he took off, and then that's when I like got up, got around the tree, and he ended up stopping in that shooting lane and shot him, knocked him down, and right there, like he did not, I don't know how that happened. Like I shot him and he did not, he just disappeared and didn't kick or nothing. Cause I just jumped up and ran like turkey hunt now.
How about the time that you were going up and I was talking to you the day before or night before, and I says, where are you going? And he says, I'm going up,
Yeah.
Custer or whatever, And I said, mind if I go with you? Oh, no. We get up there and he goes, I'm going to go hunt these scrapes over here. He said, I don't really have a spot. I said, don't worry about it. I said, I'll,
Let's go down the other end.
Yeah, so I went down the other end, dude. I walk in there, it's starting to get daylight, and I looked over at this tree and go, yeah, I'm getting that tree right there. So I get over there in the tree. I don't know, it was hours to go after daylight. Here's something, look, here comes this buck, man. Thunk. I shoot him.
I seen, I think, 2 does.
Yeah. And I got out there, and he's walking down the road to me, See anything? Yeah. I killed a buck. What? We had the deer hauler, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we did.
Yeah, because we pulled back in on that trail, and then we...
Yeah. That was the first year that I was shooting those ACCs. And that thing, man, I mean, I shot that deer right behind the front leg, man. It was just, went right through him, just smoked him. He didn't look good when he was running off. He was having a problem. But that was funny.
Yeah, we'll have to get John up to the camp in the UP.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just for the camp atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
So I did get that, like, I went up, I did go up to Jason's cabin a couple times, like rifle hunting.
Well, it's not with us, though.
But, and that was with, old Rodney. And
I'm talking about, this will be an experience for you.
let's do it during bow season.
Well, that's what we
used to do that, like for like opener though.
Yeah, we'd go up there, for several days. Yeah, that's fun.
But, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
well, I think that's all we have tonight.
Well, I mean, we're at 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Right.
So
I gotta get up early and go to work too.
We've been rocking it, but no, I just to your point, like to me, that was very nostalgic from that perspective, and like all of those stories that you were going back through, and like you could tell like it was a feeling for you, like you were right back there. Mm-hmm. Like so for me, like Tom, he's wearing green wool pants with a belt knife and an orange vest, and it's like that to me is that era of deer hunting in my life. So it kind of like was full circle. You know what I mean? It reminded me of my grandpa and like, all of that sort of thing. And to be out there and to do that, like it was really awesome. Like from that point, and like the elk is awesome, and it's, just a bonus on top of everything else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But after, like growing up, in the air, it was always, you had the red and black wool, Mm-hmm. I mean, I looked forward to getting my first suit, you know what I mean? I had the Woolrich, red and black plaid, pants and the coat and everything.
I got the picture.
Yeah. And And then
who had the green and black?
I had the green and black too.
Right, because the picture of you in green and black and my dad in the red and black.
Right.
And what's crazy is
that was a shirt jack though.
I had the wool. I still had it. Up until after Dad passed away, I gave it to Jet, and Jet just had his senior pictures taken in that jacket. In Dad's wool rib.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I used to love to wear that stuff.
So you good? Host, you're the guy.
So yeah, we're all done then, right?
We're gonna call it.
All right. Thanks for sticking it out and giving us a week off to hunt. We got a bunch more hunting to do, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening.